This journey that SMU has been on for P5 status has been essentially covered 2 decades. I mean, we can talk about maybe the early aughts and then going into the 2010s. And while there was some athletic success, it wasn't robust as other schools moving from G5 conferences to Power 5 conferences like TCU or BYU. And of course, with SMU doing what it did this year with a conference championships, huge feather in their cap with the momentum it takes into the ACC. But what do you think was at the heart of SMU's strategy, and if you will, the presentation, to make the case that it could be a bona fide member of a P5 conference?
It's been a long process, as you said. When I got here in '95, I just couldn't believe how poor the facilities were. We were playing football down at the Cotton Bowl. Students had to get into a bus to go down there. Even when we were out at Texas Stadium, the same thing occurred. The university wasn't getting anything. That's an overstatement. The university was getting very little out of playing intercollegiate football that way. I'd come from Ole Miss, where the Grove and everything, to every time you had a home game, it was a huge event for the campus, and it recruited athletes and non-athletes. So it was very obvious to me at the very beginning that we had to have a new facility. And talking with Clark Hunt and Ray and Nancy Hunt, and we put the story on the front of our stadium, just how that happened. But that was the first thing we had to do. And then basketball. We needed the Moody Foundation to do something. And soccer, I mean, it looked like we had a high school stadium, and I could go on and on. We didn't have anything for golf. Tennis was, non-existent practically. I mean, and those are not big sports, but they speak to how the university feels about sports, in which, given our clientele, quote unquote, we should have good facilities. I mean, we have enough people that have financing to have those kind of facilities. And so it became clear that the facilities had a lot to do. And so if you looked at what we sent out now, it had a lot to do about facilities. And I think doing the Weber End Zone project was the coup de grace. I mean, the stadium, Ford Stadium, was great. It was copied by a lot of different places and building stadia. But we needed to close in the end zone. The fact that the end zone wasn't enclosed to some of those A5 schools meant that it wasn't sufficient.
Right.
And so we led with the Weber when we were talking about it. And then we talked about all the other facilities. And once we got people to come and look at them, just like for our academic facilities, people go, oh my word, I had no idea. And that was one of the reasons George Kliakoff, who was the commissioner of the Pac-12, came here, and that was his huge response and why he was so supportive of us. And once we got people to come, which they were hesitant to do because they knew the press was looking, but once we got them to come, they were impressed.
I want to go back to when you first arrived at SMU in 1985. There was still that hangover from the death penalty. As I shared with you, I was a student during that time. There appeared to be a sense of uber cautiousness about allowing football and other athletics to have a presence again. And what did you encounter when you first arrived, and what did you believe was the path for athletics to eventually reach that status to where we are today, moving into the ACC?
Well, there was so much that had to be done, including, the stadium is just one part of it. The requirement that student athletes be admitted to the university before they could be really brought to campus just totally handicapped the coaches of that era. I mean, it just simply wasn't any way to be competitive in our recruiting. So I worked with the faculty senate chair and some of the leaders of the faculty senate to basically work out a huge data analysis of athletes that had been here for the last 20 years, looked at their scores, looked at their GPAs in terms of their likelihood to graduate, and we came up with a cut score on the SAT and the ACT and a GPA in certain courses, and then they could be brought to campus whether they had gone through the admission process or not, if they met that high school requirement. So that helped tremendously. And then from one thing to another of reviewing what it took to be successful academically here. So things have been kind of turned over to the faculty in a way that just precluded us from being able to recruit competitively. And so the faculty then worked with us, and it took several years.
Right.
before we could be competitive.
I want to ask you about your $1.5 billion Ignited campaign, something that you had a great interest in, a great vested. The university has had great success with that, but the
Yeah.
timing of that, what has that meant, especially with the ACC being now joining the ACC? What has that meant to have that campaign be running basically in concert with it?
It has been tremendous because we were able to say not only are we doing things athletically, but look at what else is going on academically,
Right.
and that what we're doing athletically just fits in with what we're doing institutionally. And so the timing of it was frankly perfect.
With the ACC, there have been discussions about, or have there been discussions about this university maybe expanding undergraduate student enrollment? What's been the discussions about that, if any, to this point?
Well, there hadn't been any discussions with ACC. We have been slowly increasing the first year class now for about 10 years. It was 1,200 back in 2005, 6 in that area, and so now we're 1,600 first year class. We intend to move it up some, but there are schools. Our first year class is not that much smaller than a number of those schools over there, Wake Forest in particular, and even Duke from that standpoint. We intend to get a little bit bigger, but over each year.
Mm-hmm.
But the size of the university is not nearly as important as how much support it has.
Sure. As we close, obviously getting into the ACC, one of the defining moments, one of your proudest moments here as university president, maybe one or two others that you would define as like kind of like you've been most gratified with.
Well, we had so much competition to get the Bush Presidential Center, and it got so intense because of our inability to close out some real estate that would be necessary or useful for that. Once that was placed here, we felt awfully good about it. And so in terms of just sheer achievement, that's been a very significant one too, just like getting that call from the ACC.
Absolutely. You've been more than gracious with your time. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. You bet.
For Dr. Gerald Turner, I'm Kevin Longquist. We'll see you for On the Pony Express Hilltop Visits next time.